Sure. So the story of Stanford and Silicon Valley is really embedded in this cycle of students, faculty, and companies in local industry all working together to make this magic happen. And here we've got a timeline of events showing key moments in Stanford history, but I'll start a little bit after the founding, which was in 1891. This fellow here is Cyril Elwell, a name that you've probably never heard of, but is extremely important to the Silicon Valley story. He was a graduate of Stanford. He got hired to do a startup company, which actually had been founded 2 years before by a 17-year-old high school student. It was the first wireless company founded in the Silicon Valley area. Long before Silicon, long before anyone was thinking about Stanford as a high-tech hub, that was actually the beginnings of it. So this led to the founding of a company called Federal Telegraph, which by World War I had become the most important high-technology company in California. And it was all done here in Palo Alto, and all involved Stanford faculty and students all working together to make that happen. That's the very first time that I can discover in the history of Silicon Valley where this ingredient of a very brilliant young entrepreneur, Stanford faculty, and money from risk-taking individuals all came together to form what later became a model, a standard way of doing things in Silicon Valley. The first one of these occurs before World War I with the founding of Federal Telegraph. That 17-year-old high school student sadly died in the aftermath of the great San Francisco earthquake in 1906, which is why this Stanford graduate had to come in and take his place and take the company to the next level. All throughout here are very famous people. We'll just kind of skip ahead. Dave Packard and his good friend Bill Hewlett famously founded a company that lives on today as HP and Keysight. They were students of Fred Terman, who was a professor here. Fred Terman's father, by the way, invented the IQ test. And so Fred Terman was very, very disciplined. He wrote 1 page of a book every day, which is why he could crank out so many books. I can't do that. I don't know many faculty who can, but Fred Terman could. And he thought it was unfortunate that many graduates of this school had to go back east to get a job in New York or other places like that. And he felt that was just wrong. We wanted to keep the talent we trained here and keep this virtuous cycle going. So if there's one man who deserves the most credit for creating and sustaining that model of innovation, it's really Fred Terman. He's the one who said, we want our graduates to stay here. We want them to start companies here. We want them to work with faculty to build companies that will then employ our students and generate new problems to work on, which will then generate solutions that create the next wave of creating companies. So Fred Terman had that vision and he made it work. And after World War II, he worked tirelessly to build up exactly that. So the Silicon Valley that we know today is really the model that he envisioned around World War II. So we thank Fred Terman for all the things that happened. And here are some other moments in history that just show various faculty doing great technical things. And so I won't bore your audience with those things, just simply show that the seeds that were planted way back around as early as 1908 took all this time to build up to the present that we see. So although some people think Silicon Valley was an overnight event, we see that there were many nights. And Silicon Valley had ups and downs, and it's recreated itself several times. And it's taken 120 years or so for all of that to evolve. So it's an overnight success story that took about 100 years to happen. Well, that's a very broad question. I get asked that question a lot. And the best answer I've been able to come up with is that it's really a result of something that happened even before Stanford got founded. And that was the gold rush. The gold rush brought many, many people into California. In fact, it's why California was very quickly made a state in the United States. And what that did was it trained people into a very peculiar way of thinking. You had lots of people coming to California thinking they're all going to become rich. Actually, only a small number became rich. Most of them died poor. But everyone had an equal chance at becoming rich, and that was the key. So everyone dreamed of getting wealthy, only a small number were going to get lucky enough to get wealthy. And so that trained people into a certain risk-taking way because, well, somebody's going to get rich, it might as well be me, so let's give it a try. And if you fail, you try it again. You dig for gold here, don't have success, you pick up stakes, you move your tent over there and try digging in some other place, and maybe now your luck will change. It also created a wealthy class of people who had gotten rich by luck. They would like to think they got it by being smart, but they were also very lucky, and the honest ones recognized that. And they were willing to risk that money on another person's risk-taking, that they might get lucky and multiply their investment by some large factor. So by the time Silicon Valley is ready to start, by the time Stanford is going strong, by the time 1906, 1908 rolls around, you have enough people in the valley with money and this risk-taking philosophy that the ingredients are there for now adding intellectual capital to this mix and create what has become Silicon Valley. And so we're actually surviving on 150-year-old psychology. And the question is, how much longer can that persist? But the reason it happened here, I'm convinced, is because of the gold rush. The early entrepreneurs that funded Federal Telegraph included Chinese immigrants who had saved money during the gold rush from running laundries and, and cleaning tools. They invested carefully and they became wealthy as a result of their investments in high technology. So you have this very interesting mixture of risk takers, entrepreneurs, and academics to create some interesting magical broth that continues to be enjoyed more than a century later. It's a fascinating story, which is why it hasn't been copied successfully in other parts of the world. The preconditions don't exist, or at least the preconditions are different in other parts of the world. So their stories are going to probably unfold in a different way than the story of Silicon Valley. So that's the reason why this place is different.